The question is the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Fadden.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I rise to talk to the motion of acknowledging support for the advancement of democracy around the world, including in Pakistan, and to recognise the importance of ministerial accountability in our Westminster system of government. Churchill's famous dictum that democracy is the worst form of government except for all those other forms that have been tried from time to time is indeed correct. It was delivered in the Commons on Remembrance Day 1947 and was fitting at the post-war time it was delivered. I contend it remains fitting today. Churchill had won the war, but in the election of 1945 he was defeated, seen not as the man to organise the peace. When the news came out, Churchill was taking a bath. He remarked, "They have a perfect right to kick me out. That is democracy." He returned to power, of course, in 1951, but note that the remark about democracy was made when he'd lost. And that's the wonderful nature of democracy. When only the gentle hum of shredders fill the thick, disappointed ministerial air once people have voted for a change, that is democracy. When the sounds of gunfire are absent, when High Court judges can sleep well at night, not fearing their door being kicked in and themselves dragged off to prison in front of their children, that is democracy. When people live in freedom, with freedom of speech, of assembly and thought, that is democracy. It may well be the worst form of government, Mr Churchill, but it's the best of the worst, and I welcome the return to democracy in Pakistan. The Westminster system of parliamentary democracy was inherited by Australia. In a country it's fashioned around citizens electing a parliament and all being governed by one rule of law, a system of checks and balances, as the historical absolutist monarchies crumbled to ensure that a system prevailed, separating powers into three branches: Parliament, elected by citizens; the executive branch, known as the Crown, of ministers, cabinet, public servants administering the law passed by Parliament; the third branch, the judiciary, which cannot make laws. Its role is purely judicial. But it's interesting to note that neither the Prime Minister nor the Cabinet are mentioned in the Australian Constitution. The framers of the Constitution took their existence for granted, as they did the various conventions of the Westminster system of government inherited from the United Kingdom. Within our great democracy, guided by our Westminster tradition, ministerial accountability is paramount. The government standard of ministerial ethics, Exhibit A, Mr Deputy Speaker, states in the very first bullet point of the foreword, the very first bullet point, that lobbyists will be required to register their details publicly on a register of lobbyists before seeking access to ministers or their officers. The very first bullet point. Section 8.2 further says that this register will be available online. I've tried to find it online, Mr Deputy Speaker, and you can imagine my surprise when I couldn't. So I had my staff call the office of the Prime Minister, indeed at 11:05 a.m. this morning, and they said they'll call us back. And at this time, they still haven't called back. Perhaps they're on a Rudd day off like the Prime Minister. This is despite Senate estimates on the 18th of February, 4 days ago, revealing that there are no rules in relation to meeting with lobbyists in advance of the register being established. Indeed, Labor actually refused to answer the Senate estimate question about how they will define lobbyists or what constitutes a meeting with a lobbyist. This government can't even get the very first bullet point of their standards of ministerial ethics right. I warn the Australian people here this morning that we are in for 3 very dark years of misery as this Labor administration follows the other state Labor governments on the slippery path of moribundness. Exhibit A also says in 3.1 that ministers must be able to demonstrate they've taken all reasonable steps. There's a typo. The preposition to is missing. It should say able to demonstrate. I seek leave, Mr Deputy Speaker, to table this shoddily written document to allow the Prime Minister, whose signature I'm sure is on it, to fix it up before they embark on their education revolution.
Seek leave to table the document. Leaves the record.
like the missing preposition. The Prime Minister and most of his ministers are indeed missing
Order.
with the
The
preposition.
member's time has expired.